The member from Thornhill.
Thank you, Speaker. And good morning, everyone. My question is for the Premier. You're not an elected Premier. You hold office because about 1,000 Liberal partisans voted for you. But you use that office to hold Ontarians hostage by buying union peace with one-off deals. Now,
order, please. Order. I actually hear it coming from both sides, so we could bring it down, please, so the question could be put. Member.
Recently, the LCBO and OPSU's Liquor Board Employee Division reached an accord averting a strike right before the May long weekend. The LCBO had empty shelves and lineups out the door while racking up sales that topped $28 million that day. The whole thing was a scare tactic, Speaker, used to boost revenues and manipulate your government because OPSU knows your track record. OPSU's ratification vote is set for June 3rd, but a copy of the collective agreement's highlights is posted on their website. It says the 4-year deal includes a so-called wage freeze, Premier. But, Premier, it's smoke and mirrors because there are signing bonuses of $9 million. Now, Premier, how can you call it a wage freeze while handing out
Premier. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would just say that in terms of my status as an elected member and as the Premier, the people of Don Valley West certainly did elect me, Mr. Speaker, and it seems to me that there was a convention and that the party elected me. So, Mr. Speaker, I hold this position with pride and am doing everything in my power to work for the people of Ontario. So, Mr. Speaker, on the issues of the agreement with the employees at the LCBO, I'm not going to speak to the specifics. I understand that the ratification vote is going to happen, Mr. Speaker, but we have worked very hard to make sure that all of the settlements fall within the parameters that we outlined, Mr. Speaker, and that is wage constraint, and my understanding is that the agreement fell within those parameters, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you, Speaker. You refuse to admit, Premier, that you're in over your head and that you've lost control while Ontarians continue to pay for this nonsense. Premier, the one thing I believe that you are consistent about is deflection. So I say, enough is enough. You and your government have been caving to union demands on the backs of Ontario taxpayers for the last 9.5 years. Here's what you said in this House on March the 4th, and I'm quoting. We've been very clear that constraining public sector wages is part of what we're doing and will continue to do. That's why we're on target. The Drummond report said that if we didn't take those measures, if we didn't work to constrain costs, then we would not be able to balance the budget. Accurate quote, Premier, and accurate answer. Premier, you are neither constraining costs nor on target to balance the budget. We both know that. Why don't taxpayers know about the full cost of your backroom union deals? Will the McGuinty Wynne Liberals make these deals public today?
Thank you, Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Well, I just have to counter what the member opposite said in terms of our being on track to balance the budget. We've overachieved on our deficit reduction targets every single year, Mr. Speaker. So we are on track to eliminate the deficit by 2017-18. And with regard to public sector wages, Mr. Speaker, let me just talk about some negotiated agreements which are in the public realm. With the English Catholic teachers and AFO, the French teachers, Mr. Speaker, we realized a total savings of $2 billion over 3 years, Mr. Speaker. AMAPSIO, 10,000 public service employees, Mr. Speaker, 1,000 hours of bargaining. The savings there, Mr. Speaker, $24.6 million in 12-13, $30.4 million savings in the year 13-14, Mr. Speaker. The OMA, the Ontario Medical Association, 25,000 doctors. Net savings of almost $400 million over 2 years. We are constraining wages, Mr. Speaker. That's why we're on.
Thank you. Final supplementary.
Thank you. Premier, how can you stand here in the People's House and disregard facts and even your own words? You've always put union bosses and partisan interests ahead of taxpayers, with over 50% of the Ontario budget going to government workers' salaries, you cannot achieve restraint without an across-the-board wage freeze, as I proposed in Bill 5, which has passed second reading. According to OPSU's website, your most recent deal also includes general wage increases for 2015 and 16 at roughly 2% per year, and in case of privatization or closure of an establishment, part-time employees would now receive $2,000 for employee transition, which is up from $1,000 under the previous agreement. Who but you could call this a wage freeze? The unions know what's in the agreements. The Liberals know what's in the agreements. Why don't the people of Ontario?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So I'm going to speak to the nub of this question, which I think is really, do you want to work with organized labour or not, Mr. Speaker? Do you believe that working with people who are collectively bargaining is a good idea or not, Mr. Speaker? We think it's a good idea. We think it's a good idea to honour the collective bargaining process, Mr. Speaker, to work with employees of government, to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that we set very clear parameters and that we work within those parameters, but that we do work in that collective bargaining process in good faith, Mr. Speaker. The reality is that the member opposite does not agree with that position. The member opposite would undermine labour in the province, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite does not believe, as if I can say from their behaviour, they do not believe in working with employees who are in collective bargaining situations, Mr. Speaker. We do, and that's the work that we've been doing.
New question, the member from Thornhill.
Working with doesn't mean caving in. So back to the Premier. Ontarians are left shaking their heads. Ontarians expect transparency and accountability from elected officials. They aren't getting that from you or from your cronies. You put union bosses and Liberal Party interests ahead of taxpayers, and because you cannot control any of this, an arbitrator has raised hospital costs by awarding SEIU a 4% increase over 2 years, while you stand here and say that you're reining in spending. Your Liberal government has created a new elite workforce in the public sector, complete with gold-plated pensions, greater job security, higher wages than the rest of Ontarians who work to pay for those salaries and will never receive such luxurious benefits. Your only balancing act is to say one thing and do another, Premier. So how are you going to balance the budget when you keep spending beyond our means?
Premier.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I find it very curious from the member opposite who's talking about wage restraint, and yet when we were there to try to resolve issues with the doctors, to resolve issues with teachers, to resolve issues with regards to generic drugs, you stood idle. And we had to take some tough decisions. We moved forward on moving that bar to control our spending. And as a result, our spending is below 1% year-over-year growth. And when it comes to these wages and the dealings that we've had with LCBO, I'm very proud of the negotiations that our teams did to create a wage freeze over the next 2 years. And what matters here, Mr. Speaker, are results. And the results are we are having a 0-0 wage freeze over the next 2 years. And, Mr. Speaker, we're creating cooperation and collaboration with all stakeholders, because a collective agreement, a negotiated agreement, is the right way to go, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
You guys take a tough decision, I'll eat my hat. Look, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. This morning alone, you've attempted to pull the wool over Ontarians' eyes twice. You cannot sugarcoat the facts. With over 50% of the budget going to government workers' salaries, this is a serious issue that your government has demonstrated that it does not know how to handle. Instead, Ontarians keep learning about wasted tax dollars through the lack of transparency and accountability evident in e-health, in Orange, more recently diluted cancer treatments. Premier, Finance Minister, how many times do we have to ask? How are you going to balance the budget when you keep spending like drunken sailors just to keep up with your unions?
Minister of Finance.
So, Mr. Speaker, the Tea Party thrives over there. They're looking to bust unions at all costs. What we need, Mr. Speaker, is a collaborative effort. We need to work closely for the benefit of taxpayers. And that's what's resulting in our budget, and that is what has occurred over the last couple of years. Even arbitrated deals are coming in at 0-0. So, Mr. Speaker, we will continue. We will continue to work with all partners. We'll continue to respect the collective agreements, and we'll continue to work towards the benefit of the province in the end, because ultimately that's what we want. What we don't need and quite respectfully, we don't need to have continuing fights on constitutional debates and issues that will polarize us even further. We need to cooperate. We need to work for the benefit of all of Ontario. And we'll work with you for that matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Final supplementary.
If the Tea Party's thriving over here, I've got to say socialism's thriving over there. You constantly kowtow to the unions. You just caved in to multiple NDP demands that will cost $1 billion plus annually. Finance Minister, your track record speaks for itself. You only know how to put party politics ahead of taxpayers' interest, and you're wrapped around far too many fingers. It's that simple. The cost of doing business in backroom deals with the Liberal Party at the expense of taxpayers has been detrimental to Ontario's economy. With all of these backroom deals, now Ontario is facing the highest debt in history, and the Finance Minister knows it. Ontario taxpayers cannot continue to foot the bill for your party's political games and for your pandering. When will you and your party finally admit that you're in over your heads and you don't actually have a way out?
So, Mr. Speaker, I am very proud to say that our track record does speak for itself. That is why we have $5 billion lower deficit than we originally projected. That's why next year our projected deficit is another $1 billion down. And we will continue.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we will continue. We will continue to be disciplined. We will continue to constrain our spending as necessary. We have made every effort to maintain it below 1% year over year, and that has been proven by our track record. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, even our negotiated settlements within the envelope that we've identified has also been met. So it would be nice, Mr. Speaker, if the official opposition would also work in a minority government, as is a third party, for the benefit of the people of Ontario. This budget reflects the entire scope of Ontario's issues. It's for the people of Ontario.